I'm Evan Knappen.
And I'm Teddy Knappen.
And welcome to Gun Lawyer. So, our show here, one of the things that is very, very famous about our show are GOFUs. And GOFUs, as my listeners know, are gun owner F-ups. And the idea with GOFUs is these are real cases, actual things that happened that are expensive lessons that people learn that you, the listener, get to learn for free. And of course, we always do the GOFU at the end of the show, whatever this week's GOFU may be. But suddenly I've been pounded with GOFUs, and they're very important. And I said, you know what? We're going to do a 3-round burst here of some really important GOFUs, including what I want to begin with by telling you about this actual case, and it illustrates just how insane New Jersey is and what every law-abiding gun owner could in fact face. And of course, I'm not using any names, but this is actual situation that occurred, and some things looking at the situation that and not just necessarily a mistake that the gun owner did, but something that hit me as extremely important for every New Jersey gun owner to make sure they do. There's a very simple thing that is very important, that could be critical between whether or not they hold you in jail or release you. And we're going to get to that from this story. So you'll learn this secret so that you don't end up in this GOFU situation spending days or weeks incarcerated for nothing, because that's what the gulag does, as you know. And this is a case that wraps it all up into that. So here's this guy who comes into Jersey, and he's at a mall in Jersey. Now, as you may know, the mall is not in and of itself a sensitive place, right? Those of us who have, familiarized ourselves, which hopefully all of you have, with these sensitive places, a mall is not per se a sensitive place. Now, there can be rules regarding malls where they say, hey, no guns in the mall, we don't want guns, And any private property, whether open to the public or not, can have a prohibition privately saying we don't want any guns here. In the same way they could say we don't want any dogs, we don't want any bare feet, things like that. Like the property owner has certain control. But if there is such a sign, if there is such a statement by a property owner, then if you come onto that property and they don't want you on that property for a reason such as that, they can't say, hey, we don't allow minorities on our property. Like, you can't have racial discrimination or that in a place open to the public. But you can have other restrictions. Now, I happen to personally think that firearms should be viewed as civil right and in the same category as discrimination, because it is a civil right. But that's not currently how the law is. And so if a private entity prohibits guns, says no guns, then if you still go on that property and specifically if you're told to leave and don't, then you're what's known as a defiant trespasser. So what we're talking about is trespassing, but trespassing is not a sensitive place violation. Sensitive place violations are specific gun law violations that create a certain place that becomes a prohibited area under law to carry a gun, even if you have a permit to carry. So this person's in the mall and apparently gets approached by mall security, who has allegedly dogs that can sniff gunpowder. Believe it or not, they're out there. And apparently he's approached and they say, "We think you have a gun, please leave." And he does. No problem. Asked to leave. He leaves. And after leaving, while in his car driving, gets stopped by police, more than even one, because, oh, there's a gun, right? Because obviously security called it in, I guess, at some point. And he's stopped, and he is stopped for violating, in their minds, the sensitive place prohibition under Section 24, under Chapter 58 of the sensitive places. And what is that? What is that sensitive place that they believe he's in violation of? Oh, New Jersey's version of the vampire rule, right? The vampire rule is you need permission before you go onto any private property, right? That is the issue that's before the United States Supreme Court. The Hawaii, the Wolford case in front of SCOTUS. We're waiting for a decision. Now, Hawaii had the law just like New Jersey. The only difference is New Jersey's vampire rule case saying that you can't go onto private property, whether open to the public or not open to the public, cannot go on any private property in New Jersey unless you first have permission to carry your gun there. In other words, they needed to have a sign, it says, we love guns, basically guns welcome, guns permitted, essentially, a sign, or you got specific permission from the property owner before you enter the property, hence the vampire rule, as long as you don't invite the vampire in to your place. That's where that comes from. Well, New Jersey's vampire rule, to impose this, you need permission first before you can go on private property, even private property owned by open to the public, has been found and was found unconstitutional in the Coons versus Platkin case in Coons. And in that case, as you may recall, Judge Bum found it was unconstitutional and put a injunction on that section, saying it is unenforceable, it's unconstitutional, that any private property that is open to the public, you're allowed to bring your gun on unless it's otherwise a sensitive place, okay? So, if you want to go into a 7-Eleven with your carry gun, you can. It's open to the public, even though it's privately owned by 7-Eleven. Now, if you want to go to a private residence, a private place, it's not open to the public, then you do need advance permission for that. If you go into even your friend's house, and then your friend needs to be able to say, yeah, you have permission to have your gun at my house, but not open to the public. So the mall is open to the public. The mall is not a per se sensitive place. Yet, in this case, the basis for stopping and arresting this man or woman, I won't even tell you what the sex is, the basis for the arrest is an alleged violation of the sensitive place section for which there is a federal injunction against enforcement. And then, because somehow there's this belief that if you are in violation of sensitive place, you're also unlawfully carrying, even though you have a carry permit, which makes absolutely no sense. There's no logic to that. He's charged with unlawful possession of a handgun without a carry permit, even though he has a carry permit. And of course, with those gun charges, off to the gulag you go. So you are arrested and you are put in jail. And now the gulag kicks in, where there's 48 hours in which the prosecutor gets to decide whether to seek pretrial detention, solely within the discretion of the prosecutor. And if the prosecutor decides to seek pretrial detention, you're going to be held for another 5 days before there's a hearing when we can actually argue to get you out. And then with the new law that was just signed by Murphy, they can get an additional 5 days to make sure that the gun is operable, to get an operability report, which is irrelevant to the charges anyway. So, by this arrest, you actually have the opportunity to be incarcerated basically for 2 weeks, guilty of nothing. What happened? Well, luckily I got a call very quickly when this person was in jail. Loved ones got a hold of me. And this is on a Saturday, my friends, on a Saturday. Yeah, they do these on a Saturday even. And they just hired me in time that I was able to get onto the court hearing 15 minutes before that first 48-hour time period for that very first hearing, where there's no argument and the prosecutor either is going to say we're seeking pretrial detention or not, but at least I could get on. And lo and behold, I get on, and the prosecutor, big shock, is seeking pretrial detention, which means he's going to be held, or she is going to be held, another 5 days or so, right? To have that hearing, and maybe longer if they're going to go for the operability nonsense too.
Doesn't Bergen County always seek pretrial intervention?
It's not just Bergen, and let me just say this isn't necessarily even Bergen, by the way, Teddy. But most counties have a policy of just automatically seeking pretrial detention on most gun cases. So that's not a big surprise. But what happens is, in this 48-hour period here, we still have the court appearance, but there's nothing an attorney officially can do because the prosecutor's given the sole discretion, and the prosecutor says, well, it's gun charges, it's Graves Act, because, of course, the seriousness of the charge is second degree. You're looking up to 10 years in state's prison. You got a minimum mandatory 3.5 years, no chance of parole. So because of the seriousness of that offense and Graves Act, and it's guns, we're going to seek pretrial detention. And the court says, Mr. Knappen, you have anything that you want to add? And I say, and here's exactly what I did for. I said, look, I understand how much discretion the prosecutor has here. Normally, we just have to wait until the hearing in order to argue. But I have to say, and I make it clear here, I say, look, my client not only had a permit to carry, and why the state can't access it, they took his wallet, and he can't get to his wallet. And for whatever reason, there's some glitch in them trying to get it out of the state police. I don't know why. But the very basis for his arrest was for a law for which there is an injunction, a federal injunction, that's been upheld even by the appeals court. So you have law enforcement violating a federal court injunction and charging and utilizing a statute that is enjoined from being enforced, so in complete violation of that. I make it clear that that is what is going on here with someone who has a permit, who has the lowest scores on the PSA of a 1-1, that's the lowest you can get. The PSAs are your flight risk and danger risk that they calculate into whether you're to be released. And now they're looking to hold him for another 5 to 10 days to even try to get him to argue out. And at that point, the court officer actually says, well, counselor, there's no argument here at this level. You'll have to argue, at the hearing and when it gets scheduled. And I said, look, I'm not arguing anything. I said, you know what I'm doing? I'm putting the state on notice as to the civil rights violation taking place on my client. Which time, Prosecutor says, look, we haven't even had a chance to talk. I said, no, we haven't. I just got hired and got on here 15 minutes. Well, let's start. I said, okay. So we had a private conference. And when we came back, I'm happy to say that the prosecutor withdrew their motion for pretrial detention, and my client got out of jail that day, and now we will fight these charges. And I'm extremely confident in how that fight is going to go as well. So, folks, what are the takeaways? Look at the risk you're running. Look at the utter and complete failure of the Attorney General of New Jersey to inform law enforcement as to the changes in the law by these court actions. Why are the police charging an offense which has been enjoined? Police should know better, but I'll tell you what else. The Attorney General should be instructing, the way they've done so many other times and so many other things, to all law enforcement, explaining how that sensitive place has been enjoined and how on public property it is not a sensitive place where you need prior permission under the vampire rule. That hasn't been done. So you have what is essentially false arrest taking place. You have a system designed to incarcerate gun owners. It is outrageous, and you need to know that this is what you're up against. So what do you need to protect yourself? Where's the GOFU aspect? Well, let me tell you something that would be really important. Here's what everybody should do. Make sure your carry permit, make sure your gun licenses are also, copies are given to loved ones, people you can count on. Because if you get incarcerated and your wife or your parents or your brother is calling me, if they can get me copies of your carry permit, gun license, that you otherwise can't access, I can get that to the prosecutor. There doesn't have to be a dependency for somehow getting it out of the state police in time or finding it in some wallet that's been confiscated and held in evidence in some other place, in some other room, somewhere else. And that can be of great assistance, immediate assistance, in addressing your arrest and avoiding further gulagging of you. So make sure, the takeaway is, make sure that folks that care about you, that would be the people you would go to if you had a problem, that they can provide and have access to copies of your licenses. That would be incredibly important. And the other thing is, make sure you have an attorney that you can get a hold of right away, that can come to your aid, argue to get you out on a Saturday where time is of the essence. Those are the takeaways that are critical from this experience. Let me tell you, the GOFU has taken on a life of its own, and I'm glad about it. And I have here a listener who sent a GOFU that they wanted to make our other listeners aware of, and I appreciate that. They asked that I not use the name, but here's the GOFU letter. It says, I have a GOFU for you. It's important for people to know to do this, so please share it on your show. This past fall, I planned a trip to Western New York to visit my family. I have a New Jersey PTC, also a PA PTC. I really like to have my gun along on trips with the highway driving. So I asked a few guys at the shooting range what I should do with the gun. When I got to New York State line, they told me to stop at a rest stop before I entered the state, put the unloaded gun in a car safe, and I should be good. That's what I did. When I reached my destination, I told my family I had brought it, since they like guns. And they absolutely freaked out. They told me police would arrest me. It was illegal to bring a gun into a destination in New York. And I'd better bring it in the house, hidden, keep it hidden, hide it really well, and they would drive back. She got me worried, so worried, in fact, I couldn't get to sleep. So I checked New York gun laws, and sure enough, she was correct. I was scared and felt terrible, and I was incriminating my family members. Needless to say, the gun in a safe box and cable were very hidden on the way back. I was careful not to break any speed limits. You can sum it up this way, but my takeaway is you have to do your own research before you take your gun out of state. Otherwise, you might end up in jail. And I'm very thankful that I did. And this is very true. State lines mean something. Now, here's where the GOFU was here. The GOFU was not following Title 18, 926A thoroughly. That's the federal preemption that lets you transport interstate. You have to be going from one place where you lawfully can possess and carry to another place. Your end destination has to be a place where you can lawfully possess and carry. And since New York does not recognize New Jersey permit or Pennsylvania permit, and unless you have a New York non-resident permit, that will not cover you. So bringing your cased unloaded gun into New York, now you're possessing a handgun in New York, and you don't have the protection of federal preemption. That's the problem. And it is a GOFU, and this person is absolutely right. Make sure you know the laws. Make sure you clear it with counsel so that you do not end up a GOFU, because if that person had been stopped in New York with that handgun while in New York, they would face dire consequences. So know the gun laws, know the state laws, do your research. Best bet, well, you can always ask me. That's one thing you want to do. Get my book, New Jersey Gun Law. I'll shamelessly plug my book right now, because right in my book is a chapter on how to properly interstate transport. Right in there on transportation of guns. What you need to know. Go to evannappin.com and get your copy of my book, New Jersey Gun Law. It's the Bible of Jersey Gun Law. That's the kind of stuff you need. That's the kind of information you must have. That's what you need to do. You cannot take these things lightly, because the consequences can be dire. And we see it. So I appreciate this GOFU. I appreciate it being pointed out, because these are real people experiencing the horrors of gun laws that are designed to ruin people's lives and to turn law-abiding citizens into criminals and to oppress our Second Amendment rights. That's all these laws do, but you got to protect yourself, folks. So learn from these tips and learn from these cases so that you don't become the next GOFU. Hey, let me tell you about our friends at We Shoot. We Shoot is a indoor range in Lakewood, New Jersey. It's a range Teddy and I both shoot at. We love We Shoot. Great training, great range facilities, great pro shop, great bunch of folks. And this week, they're running some great specials. They have the Chaparrino 60DS, which is a futuristic revolver with its low-bore access design. It's kind of cool. It delivers, reduced recoil because of that and fast follow-up shots. They've got a Mossberg Gold Reserve sporting shotgun. It's a over and under, built for clay and field. It has engraving and premium walnut. It's competition ready. It's a beautiful gun. Check out the Mossberg Gold Reserve Sporting. They also have a Springfield Prodigy comp gun, modern double stack 1911 style performer. It has an integrated compensator and it's optics ready. And it has serious speed for duty or competition. Check out that Springfield. And you can also check out Sarah Sablum. She is on the hunt for a perfect carry gun. You can check out one of these We Shoot girls there. Go to WeShootUSA.com for their great website with amazing photography. They're running great deals. They look forward to helping you and making you part of the We Shoot family. Go to WeShootUSA.com. May also mention our friends at the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Club, who just recently, through my friend and colleague Dan Schmutter as well, they argued in the Coons case at the appellate level, and we're looking good. I'm cautiously optimistic, and that's your association at work in the courts fighting the carry killer bill. They're also fighting the assault farm large capacity magazine. You need to be a member. Go to anjrpc.org. Make sure you belong to your state association. They are the gun rights defenders for New Jersey. You'll get a great email of what's going on. You'll get the alerts. You'll know that you're part of the solution and helping to fight the gun rights oppressors in New Jersey. Go to anjrpc.org and join today. Teddy, what do you have for us today in Press Checks?
Well, as you know, press checks are always free, and this is something I want people to understand, is that we cannot take our foot off the gas when it comes to fighting the good fight for our rights, because, look, we've had a lot of great victories when it comes to Second Amendment, to the conservative movement, to getting the word out there thanks to alternative tech, but the left are slowly trying to crawl back their power. What do I mean by that? Well, our friends at Bearing Arms did an article, Cam Edwards. NBC decided to give a platform to the anti-gun activist. Oh, gee, what a shocker. As it was a Nicole Hockley out of the Sandy Hook Promise, another one out of Bloomberg's groups, who called in to demonetize online influencers in the two-way space. Someone like you and I, Dad, people like a Brandon Herrera or a Garantham, Mr. Guns, any individual who is a pro-gun influencer, they want to demonetize. That's their call to action. And I love the framework that she abuses in this. Sandy Hook and the group called Untargeting Kids, a call for platform transparency, putting parents back in charge of firearm safety. Whenever I hear the Democrats try to say, no, we need to stand on parents' rights, it's always comes down to, when it comes to firearm safety, but, hardcore pornography being offered to children, that's fine. Or, a drag queen story hour, that's fine. But no, when it comes to firearms, we need to give it back to the parents. So they were trying to run this experiment, testing YouTube accounts, mimicking a 9.
Wait a minute, Dad. Yeah. Are you telling me that the left are hypocrites?
Oh, well, as the saying goes,
I don't know about that.
As the saying goes, they only have double standards, or they would not have any standards at all.
Exactly.
That's how it always is with them. Whenever you see the term parental rights, you can see in the very corner TM. It's their version. Not when it comes to gender ideology, not when it comes to abortion, not when it comes to any other thing, but parents' rights, TM. That's their abuse of the language. Whenever you hear the word democracy, TM. Second Amendment, TM. That is their version, not what we know is to be fact and truth. It's their version. But anyways, so they ran this experiment, which, these experiments can easily be debunked just by the abuse of algorithms. But whatever. We'll say, for the sake of argument, we'll say this data is true. So they ran this, and then a 14-year-old received 1,300 firearm-related video recommendations after watching video games and movies that included firearm content. So, a kid watch a bunch of Let's Plays on Call of Duty, and then all of a sudden he gets a breakdown of an unboxing of a ACOG scope or something stupid. It's one of those where they're trying to make this argument, this very weak argument on saying, these videos are being monetized to target advertising, targeting our children. So if a kid is interested in firearms, what is the problem with that? Why? And he gets bombarded with tons of movies on all forms of graphic violence that goes into that, and then all of a sudden it comes up an ad on uh, any other influencer regarding firearm breakdown. Because that's the goal. They want you to get engagement. That's it. And then I love this one. 54% of boys from 10 to 17 report sexually charged firearm content. Now, they do not define what sexually charged
What's
firearm
sexually
content
charged firearm content? What is that?
It's called We Made It Up because they do not define
Okay.
They love to just define terms.
They
and
just
not
threw
actually
sex
use-
with guns and don't
Correct.
define it.
Correct. It's just, and by the way, they don't list any of the materials that was reviewed by the bots.
Wait, it sounds
They
like homosexuality.
I know. Yep. It is the hoplosexual all over again.
What is that? That's really interesting, huh?
Yeah, and they don't list any of the video game content that was reviewed. Doesn't list any of the movies reviewed or TV shows. Oh, because they don't want to show the sexually graphic material that is pushed by the left. That's why, ask them. if
They
you
should
ask them
list
about
it. They should
Yeah.
list all that so that we could carefully review it, Teddy.
Well, unfortunately,
All,
they
so
want to
all
skew
these
the
sexual.
data. I know, right? I love, and then she goes on where they're forming this sense of self-identity that they're getting content that is talking about firearms makes you powerful. Firearms makes you sexually attractive. Firearms are the way to solve your conflict. Firearms are used to solve very certain conflicts. When you're
Yes.
defending yourself against a rapist, a pedophile. Certain situations, like it's very solution. It's not a magic wand, but it solves certain issues. But and they like to always equate like, oh, why do you need a gun? Because your penis is like it's one of the small. Like it's that they always do that. We're like, what does that have to do with the aspect of your rights to defend yourself? Like that is the goal that they always try to play. And then she goes off of this whole thing of we need to demonetize. We need to review these content and look at the algorithms of YouTube transparency on firearms. And we need to sense, this long-winded conversation is just, we need to have time to deletion for videos for unsafe handling of firearms. What's unsafe? Oh, there's a firearm in the video. That censorship is not our goal, though. Yes, it is.
I'll tell you what. Here's where I'll take them up on it. Before any movie or TV show where a gun is improperly handled, shows produced by all these major media producers, just have a warning. Just the way they warn about profanity, they warn about smoking. Put a warning that says unsafe firearm use is in this movie. Unsafe firearm use. You know how many times we'll see that? Because the left media is the largest actual demonstrator of unsafe and unlawful use of firearms. It's not conservatives. It's the opposite. And so let's see those warnings. That way people suddenly say, wow, look how many times firearms are abused, used improperly, and used illegally in the movies. I mean, if you can warn about smoking, you should be able to warn about that. Just put it, don't suppress it. Don't try to have prior restraint or ban the showing of any of these movies. Just put the warning up front. And people see just what's being promoted by Hollyweird.
Well, and also Hollywood promotes all the sexual deviancies where they push it on children, where children have access to now hardcore pornography all across the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to social media. Like, it's the level of, it's so disingenuous making this argument that we need to protect our children, except when it comes to the the LGBTQAI plus in schools, when it comes to all the other things that they want to sexually groom children. But firearms content, that's the issue. But when you get down to it, this is what they want. They want the 2019, they want the Biden administration censorship, where right here out of the House Judiciary Committee, where the chairman proves and shows, Google was pressured by the Biden administration to censor
That's
Americans.
That's right. This is a really good point.
Want.
They went after our First Amendment rights, just like the Second Amendment, and we lived through a period of government censorship attempts that, when you look back, it's absolutely disgusting what they pulled and what they were able to accomplish even in achieving it, Teddy. Just insane. You could never think that could happen in America, because originally the left was for free speech. The free speech movement was the left. And now that's no longer the case. They want the opposite. They don't want free speech. Oh, hell no. But it used to be part of what true liberals, not today's progressive, totalitarian liberals want, so-called. No, the classic liberal was absolute free speech, true. And they've abandoned that. They've abandoned it.
Well, it comes back to the idea of what the left always, they have no moral framework. The idea of, what feels good? What is the cultural shift? What is the shifting ideology currently? Where you now have these massive purity tests on the left, and that's why they're in a shooting war against each other as to who controls the party. But to even highlight this fact, Mark Zuckerberg said and admitted to the White House, I was pressured by the White House to censor people during the COVID-19 content. Doctors admitting all the false information that was out there, bring that up, completely censored. Off of Facebook, off of YouTube, all these platforms. X, you remember the Twitter files? Musk was releasing them weekly, showing the insidious combination of government and censorship on the public square. And this is what the left want. They are so upset that they have lost their ministry of truth. You remember that push?
And they want to use the same techniques to oppress the Second Amendment. It's all part of the game plan.
Yeah.
Well, Teddy, I appreciate you pointing this out, and I'm sure our listeners do as well. Let me tell you, we had a 3-round burst for GOFUs, and we only got 2 of the rounds out. Let me end here with the GOFU number 3. And again, we saw this in action. These are actual cases, actual realities. And I had a fellow client give a call, said, hey, they were in court and they didn't have counsel. And they had, their guns were taken, and in a allegation of a so-called domestic violence, which everything got dismissed. And there was an outstanding criminal charge that's unfounded. And going to the court, the so-called victim does not want to proceed. So what does the prosecutor do? Prosecutor tells this person, look, we're going to downgrade this to a noise ordinance. Okay, so it's no longer in the category of domestic violence, because if it stayed in that category, that makes you the equivalent of a convicted felon under federal law, so you're banned from guns. The prosecutor said, this way, with it as a noise ordinance, you're fine. You'll be perfectly fine. This will not affect your gun rights. Now, this is a person who doesn't have a lawyer, who's listening to the prosecutor, who is telling them they can plead this down to an ordinance when the key state's witness does not want to proceed and knows that the allegations that were made were not true and knows that it needs to be dropped. And so normally the thing is dismiss it straight out because the complainant, the complaining witness is not going to be real good for your case here. Okay, we can all kind of see that, and it needs to go. But instead, the prosecutor is trying to convince to take this ordinance and pay a fine and get an ordinance hit and saying that it won't affect gun rights. And here's the deal, folks. It does affect gun rights. You see, you cannot, when a prosecutor says it doesn't affect gun rights, that prosecutor is not representing you. They're representing the state. They're representing the government. And if you don't have counsel to explain to you the actual ramifications, and you try to believe this, however well-intentioned it may have been, they failed to mention here that, yeah, it's not a per se disqualifier, meaning like being a convicted felon or having a conviction for domestic violence, sure, where you're just out of the box, you're done. But the reality in New Jersey is you plead to even this dopey ordinance for noise, you now have a conviction for an ordinance that started out as a domestic violence charge, and then New Jersey, when you try to apply to get a new pistol purchase permit or renew your carry permit or do a change of address on your firearms ID card, they go, oh, public health, safety, welfare. That's what they're going to use. Public health, safety, welfare based on character, temperament. I call that disqualifier the all-inclusive miscellaneous weasel clause because that's where the abuse of discretion comes in. And if you were to fall for this, plead to the ordinance, it won't affect your gun rights, wait and see. Because now that comes up on your record, that links to the original charges, those police reports and all. You ended up taking a plea, which has this appearance that you were guilty of something, and that's why you pled. It sure as hell can affect your gun rights. So, friends, the takeaway is, the GOFU is, you're dealing on any criminal charge, make sure you have counsel that understands the gun laws, and don't try to rely on what a prosecutor may be telling you about how your rights will or won't be affected. This is Evan Nappen and Teddy Nappen reminding you that gun laws don't protect honest citizens from criminals. They protect criminals from honest citizens.
Gun Lawyer is a Counterthink media production. The music used in this broadcast was managed by Cosmo Music, New York, New York. Reach us by emailing evan@gun.lawyer. The information and opinions in this broadcast do not constitute legal advice. Consult a licensed attorney in your state.